Hi, this is Waynio with the Old People's Complaint Desk saying hello. Today's topic, I was born and raised in the 50s and 60s, like many of my fellow septuagenarians. And my community was a very close-knit community. It was Newark, New Jersey. There were traditions from the old country in many ways. I mean, the Polish, the German, the Ukrainians, the Italians, all had a very large presence in this section of town, this neighborhood. And they have relatives who were probably one generation away from, they were one generation away from being from the old country and carrying those norms on. So they come to New Jersey, they live in Newark, and they live in a neighborhood that reinforces that amongst themselves. Even though, even though I'm not Jewish, I celebrated the Jewish holidays because I have family members that were so. And then the people next door were German, and we celebrated Oktoberfest, even though we were Italian. So, it was very close-knit. So they have their values and they have their norms, and that's what it is. You are raised in that, and you really don't experience what the world is out there, what the world has to offer or hinder, or we don't know what the world is when you come from that close-knit society. You go out into the world and you find out what things are like, and holy cow, does it ever impact some people, right? Yes, it does, right? Oh. So what impacted me and many of the people I know from the era, close friends and associates, high school buddies, was the issue of men keeping company with men, as in how you would do if you were in the military or in one of the naval services, Coast Guard or Navy, and you were on a ship for long periods of time, or you were in the military for long periods of time, or I don't know, you were at a boys' school for long periods of time. But believe me, until you get out of high school, these are the norms, these are the values, this is what we do, and no one prepares you for that stuff. So what happens? Oh, well, let's see. I have a friend named Mutt. And that's his lousy name, but I can't help it. I've known him since I was in the 8th grade. And so Mutt and I were supposed to go into the service together, and it was going to be the Coast Guard. We were going to quit school and go in the buddy system, and then we would be stationed in boot camp and other places in the same area, same boat, same whatever. It was kind of like a pared down thing about seeing the world. The Coast Guard, you don't see the world. As a matter of fact, Mutt went into the Coast Guard. He quit school, went in. I drove him down to the induction center, but said, Mutt, I'm not quitting school and going on the Coast Guard. I changed my mind. He said a few things, but it was not surprising. And when he traveled to see the world after his basic training and A school, he ended up at Governor's Island on a cutter, a small cutter. So he was home every weekend, back in New Jersey. Now, there was a time then that Mutt was really in a lousy mood. I guess we were about 19 at the time, 18, whatever, we had high school-ish girlfriends and all that. And Mutt was in a horrible mood. You couldn't talk to him. He didn't talk to anybody. He was pissy. He'd come back from Governor's Island and he'd hang around and wouldn't even want to talk to anybody. And if you did go and try to talk to him, Well, there was a few of us that were quite concerned. And it took a while, but after about, I think, 6 weeks or so, because, he only came around on the weekend and sometimes he couldn't. So it took a while to figure out what was going on. And what was going on was he thought he was gay. Mutt, for the first time in his life, kept company with men. Normally, you're going to keep company with men, the boys in your school, in your class, in the locker room, the man of the family, and all that stuff and whatever, the guy at work and that. But you're talking about the Coast Guard. You're talking about a bunch of guys that are together in boot camp, morning, noon, and night. You're sleeping all in the same room. You're socializing. They're from everywhere in the world or the country with all their own values and ideas on what is attractive to them or what they are attracted to. But this being the 60s or 70s, right in the beginning, right? That was very, very hidden. And as a matter of fact, people in the 30s who were in the military, especially the Navy, who went on ships, boy, I've been hearing some stories about how hidden that was. But that's too bad in a way, because I know some people who went through World War II and kept a secret, and they died almost, they were 100 years old, and they kept that secret with them all the way. But, it was really quite evident what was going on with the individual. Should I say it? I don't know, because I don't know, and it doesn't matter. I don't care, and nothing wrong with that, from Seinfeld and all the rest of the stuff. But in, let's say, 1970 era, in the Navy, like a guy comes from all this, goes in boot camp, school, on a ship, go out to ship for days and weeks at a time. That's what he got hit with. Now, who else got hit with similar? Or, obviously, I think Mutt had some questions about his own sexuality when you're confronted with the real world and everything. And hey, you're hanging out with guys that are your friends and everything, and maybe they, I don't know, maybe they think more, but more on that later in a second. So, yes, he probably questioned his own identity. And honestly, who at least once in their life hasn't questioned, why is it we're the way we are? And I'm going to get married to a woman and do this and all that. And why? Okay, I guess that's the way it is, the norms and values that we knew, as opposed to, whatever's going on out there. So, for myself, I was in the Navy, and in the Navy, I had a good friend, Eddie, Edward. I called him Edward. A lot of people called him Ed, and I always used his full name. Now, Edward and I were very close friends, and at the same time, we were into the same things, which was clairvoyance. We were Wiccans together in this group in Hawaii. And in the group in Hawaii of Wiccans, it was a Chthonic circle, if you know what I'm talking about. And we had several kahunas who were Hawaiian priests, two of them woman, one male. And they were in the kahuna, the Wicca circle that Edward and I were members of. Edward was on the same ship. We gravitated toward one another, and the ship that we were assigned to then went into the shipyard for close to a year, maybe. And we said, living on a ship or in a yard period really stinks. Let's go get an apartment. All right, so we got an apartment, 2-bedroom, and some other people, everybody just went and scattered. And we had an apartment. And then we were there for a year or so, and okay, it was kind of strange, and people on the ship would look at me and him talking to one another in the mess hall, and they would say things like queer. What? No, we're not. I don't think gay was the word back then, but I'd say, no, we're not. We're just very good friends, and we know the same people, so we're talking about them. And they'd believe whatever they believed, especially after Edward and I lived in the same apartment, off base. Mm-hmm. It just so happens at the time, I was stepping out when I was also a Chthonic priest. I was stepping out with a wife of somebody who was on deployment. Yes, you go on a 6-month deployment. He's a sailor. He went away 6 months. He left his wife and child there. His wife made the rounds, sorry to say, and I certainly fell for it. Yep, those were weird times for me. And if I have any questions, if I ever had any questions, well, who knows? But weird times still, because women. And I then got married. Now, I saw Edward a few years after we had the apartment, and I got married and all that, and he lived in San Diego, and I would go down there a couple of times because I had to go to school training or what have you, and I would go visit Edward, stay in his apartment. Didn't think anything at all of it. Got to hang out with some of Edward's friends. Some of them were women, and then we found out basically what would happen was the women folk would leave and all the guys would stay, but they'd take me with them and we'd all go home, and I'd go home to Edward's house and go sleep on the couch. And Ed would stay with all his buddies and everything, and well, it turned out that Edward and all of his friends were gay. Really gay. And then as I would go down to San Diego every now and then, I'd stop and see Edward and say hello. You know, we're good friends, and I loved the guy. He loved me, and I liked all his friends. And I witnessed a altercation, a lover's quarrel between Edward and his male companion. And I definitely looked at that and said, now, you know what? Now, let me tell you, so up to this point now, I am completely oblivious to the fact that Edward is gay. Yes, he's gay. I live with the guy who is oblivious to it. No wonder why he had such problems when we're trying to go and get girlfriends. I mean, hey, I was hanging out with somebody else's wife doing all the crazy things sailors do, and they shouldn't do to other fellow sailors when the sailor's away for 6 months, but you know, when you're, 20 whatever, you don't know squat. And he was trying to, you know, be friends with the girl and try to be a girlfriend, and they were having a lot of problems because he didn't know to go all in or go a little in or go, you know, he just didn't know what was going on. She got tired of him being confused. So, well, shit, it turns out he was, pardon my language, he was gay. Okay. And when I got to San Diego, I saw it. And all those years, I mean, we're talking now 4 or 5 years that I've known him and lived with him for a year, and I was oblivious to it. That's how unprepared I was for the real world. Then I left the Navy and I went and got onto the Merchant Marines and started working for the Department of the Navy on a ship, the Margaret Johnson, that was chartered to the U.S. Navy, and we did surveying work or hydrographic research where basically we trailed things under the water. And they must have been robots that took pictures. I don't care. All I cared about was you do 12-hour shifts on this ship. And if it's not the 12, it's 6 to 6, 6 to 6, 1 6 for the other. And if you're on the PM shift, that's all double time. And if you're touching this cable, which you're going to be doing, it's triple or quadruple time. There's nothing like sitting there on a ship in the middle of the ocean getting quadruple time, doing something stupid and having no bills and just throwing your money in the bank. And so on that ship, again, oblivious to whatever's going on. I was unlicensed, which means I was not an officer. Right now, if you excuse me, I have to take a drink. It's getting hot. Yeah. I was unlicensed at the time, able seaman. That means I wasn't an officer, so I had a 2-man stateroom, top and bottom bunks. I had the top. My roommate had the bottom. Officers had single staterooms, like the chief mate. He had a single stateroom. And the ship was officed, home ported or whatever, in San Francisco, but worked on the Atlantic coast between Halifax, Nova Scotia, and Bermuda. Bermuda Triangle, yes, I was in a Bermuda Triangle sailor. And every day after dinner, while we're at sea, and I wasn't working the shifts because we weren't handling equipment, we were in transit or something, and we just didn't have anything streaming, I would leave my room, my roommate, see you later, and I would go away to the lounge or to the mess decks or something and watch a movie, and then I would come back after 8:30. Part of the reason why, although I did not acknowledge it or recognize it, but I knew, my roommate was very affectionately tied to a steward. And they were both guys. You're at sea. It's company of men. You know, they're all over the place. And so after dinner's put away and the dishes are washed and the stewards are off, and I'd go watch a movie and he'd go hang out with my roommate and have fun and have private time. They really appreciated that from me. And for it, in a way, they would wonder if I was gay because I was so easy. You know, it's like, yeah, I'm going to go, leave, give you guys privacy, no problem. Yeah, I know what's going on. I knew what was going on. But I didn't know exactly what was going on and how it was looked upon at me. In other words, I didn't know what I was projecting, but who knows, and how people thought of me. So anyway, let me keep going. So it's like, good. Well, one day we left the Atlantic, traveled through the canal, stopped in San Francisco, and everybody was like at home. Yay! People took off. The steward and my roommate went and got hotels and stayed away for a while, but the steward lived there in San Francisco. They were so appreciative of my tolerance or my, live and let live, that he introduced me to his sister, and I would go hanging out with them. It was a lot of fun. I was seeing the locals in San Francisco. Men, women, everybody. And yeah, man and women, women and men, women and women, men and men. All right? But I didn't know how it reflected upon me because I was so integrated in with the society that the next time we got to sea, we left San Francisco and the chief mate calls me in to his room and he got to do some overtime. Now I'm a day worker, 8 o'clock to 5 o'clock. Anything outside of those hours, you call me or bother me for 5 minutes and it's a 2-hour minimum call out at double pay. So mate called me, right? Tells me he wants me to start doing the Zodiacs. That means the small boat, the inflatable. I get to tool around on my own, all over the place. And he wants me to put together a elliptical, for exercise in his room while he sat in his bed, laid down like this, and just talking to me. Well, there used to be a guy that had the Zodiac before me, and he left at San Francisco, and he also did a lot of these jobs after working hours for the chief mate. The chief mate, I think he thought, well, it's so obvious, you're so integrated in, how would you like to have a 2-hour call out every night? Kind of like my roommate and the steward would meet up in my room or our room after the dishes were cleared. And when after dinner, I'd go meet up with the chief mate and I'd build something for an hour. Yeah. The purser, but I was oblivious. I knew what he was doing, but I took the time to put it together, kept it on the up and up, professional, and took the overtime. It only lasted once. I got the job once, but he let me keep the Zodiac because I was good at it until an old Navy SEAL came in and who was 6'5" and 300 pounds of all muscle took over. And it's like, okay, fine. You got the Zodiac. Right. And the purser, he was the one that had a problem with me. Because, yes, the purser was gay. He was a member of the at-floating gay community. And evidently, the Margaret Thompson was the gay ship in the fleet. Got it? Right. We go out for 6 weeks, come back in, everybody enjoy. Yeah. Okay, that's where I ended up. I was assigned it. Fine, I don't know why. But anyway. So the purser was very angry with me because he said, it's obvious what my true character is or my true direction is. And I was just ignoring it. And he called to mind that we went through the canal. We stopped in Puerto Rico at Roosevelt Roads for a while. That's the Panama Canal. And Roosevelt Roads is 50 miles or $100 cab ride to San Juan. We went to San Juan. In San Juan, there was this place called, I don't know if it's still there, the Black Angus. It's nothing at all like the American Black Angus. Nothing. It's a seaman's haven, a merchant seaman's haven. They have massages going on. I got 3 massages when we spent a half a day at the Black Angus. The purser wasn't there, but somehow he found out that I had 3 massages at the Black Angus. And he sits there in the middle of the Pacific Ocean en route to Hawaii and says, see, you're in denial. You had to go prove it to yourself by going into the Black Angus 3 times. I didn't go into the Black Angus 3 times. I had 3 massages. Yeah. So then he told me that I got married So, I mean, we'd have coffee once in a while. The purser is a nice guy. He's the one who does all the paying, right? He's very good at what he does, and every now and then we'd have coffee. And, we talked about former spouses. He had a wife at one time. Then he became a deck officer in the Merchant Marines and was a purser and stayed there. He found his home on the Margaret Johnson. So we'd have coffee. He knew I was married because I was married and I divorced. I left Mel. He says I left Edward to get married, to prove myself that I was straight. Then I went to the Black Angus, had 3 massages to prove it again. And that's kind of the way it went. Right? My upbringing never prepared me for that. You understand? Okay, going on ships, I knew what it was like. I knew all about ships. I studied them. Yes, I knew navigation and all the rest of the seamanly skills and boat handling and ship handling. So, but I didn't know about that. But that's where it was. And those were good times and good people, but I must tell you, this was in 70s and 80s. The internet came around in the 90s. I went looking for them, looking them all up. And you know what I found out? They were all dead. They all died in the early 90s. And it all listed pneumonia. So, yep, that's what happened to all my friends in that society that I integrated in with so well, because I accepted everybody for who they were and they accepted me. Even though a couple of them had problems with that, they wanted me to be different and I wasn't. I am what I am. And that's a crazy story. That's from the complaint desk, folks. Take it for what you mean of your own self and see what it's like if, somebody else is going to have crazy because wondering about sexuality of 50 years ago? Don't worry about it. Yeah. So, final word. You know what? They asked Cary Grant when he was 84 years old in an interview if he was gay because he shared an apartment with Randolph Scott, Malibu, a house. It was the talk of the town back in the 30s. They said, are you gay? Were you two living together as man and man? And he says, I'm 84 years old. You know what? Your question is irrelevant. Doesn't matter anymore. It's an irrelevant question. It's not a question anymore. It's irrelevant. There is no relevance to the question or to any question the reporter had of Cary Grant or Cary Grant had of himself or anybody had of themselves. At this stage, at the septuagenarian, age, I gotta get something to drink. I'm going, you can tell I'm a smoker. I'll see you later. And don't forget, subscribe, like, and share. Okay, bye. Hi, this is Waynio with a disclaimer. The information that I'm providing is not intended or implied to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, and treatment, nor as a substitute for professional mental health care or a substitute for accounting and tax preparation. These stories are my experiences. Go and have your experiences, and may they be guided by competent professional help. And I give public notice that all names are fictitious composites and I'm representing no one person, alive or otherwise. My intent here, as in all cases, is not to malign anyone or anything. Thank you.